Let's take a look at the imagery related to the Hierophant card in the Aleister Crowley Thoth Tarot. There are certain cards that I think are absolutely amazing and brilliant, and this one by Lady Frida Harris with Aleister Crowley's ideas is one of them. When you look at this card, a lot of people think that this card is a dark card, but this card does represent Gabriel the Archangel, who is a messenger spirit. If you look at the image in the center, it represents the Pope. In ancient times, the Pope wore red because red was a very expensive color and it was hard to get. These days, the Pope wears white. But in this time, it represents the Pope. And if you look at his head, he has this beautiful window, like in Notre Dame, back behind him. And churches were designed to kind of show the light or to show the way. And the windows were designed to be inspiring. And yet around his head and around the window, you actually see a dead snake. The snake, of course, represents sexual energy, spiritual energy, and the Adam and Eve metaphor. That snake is dead, and it's being stuck to the window with daggers. Swords, any type of sword, always represents elements of the mind, and how our mind tries to kill off our sexuality and our spirituality. Also, if you look down below the Hierophant, you will see Isis. In her hand, she is holding a waning moon. And in the patriarchal religions of Christianity, the intent of the Catholic Church was to suppress the feminine. So you see the divine feminine represented by Isis, small and below the masculine energy. And the waning moon is indicating that her power is not very strong at this point. You will also see the 4 winds of change in the 4 different corners. And you will see this card in other cards also. The winds of change represent the different types of beliefs and religions that have been on the planet. Sometimes God is in the face of man. Sometimes God looks like a bird. Sometimes God looks like a Quetzalcoatl kind of energy. But all the different faces and forms of the divine. You will also see that back behind him there is the image of Ganesh, or an elephant god. And this is also representative of the Christ metaphor, because Ganesh lost his head and was immortal, but he was going to die if he didn't get a head. And he took the head of an elephant, and therefore he is the elephant-headed god. He also is very Christ-oriented because he represents the elements of compassion and understanding. So it represents another element of the type of gods. Also next to the elephant, behind the Pope, you will see a bull. And if you remember all of your religion teachings, when Moses went up on the hill, they started worshiping the golden bull, the golden idol. But the bull has been a symbol of God and power and fertility for many, many centuries. You will also see in the heart of the Hierophant, you will see a child, because Christianity said, and the children shall lead. And what they also wanted was they wanted people to not be terribly educated. So only the priests and the nuns were allowed to learn to read and write, because it was easier to control people if they weren't educated. Hence we have the death of the snake also, which is the snake of knowledge. You will also see that he is holding a scepter, and that scepter is 3 circles intertwining. Believe it or not, this symbol is older than the symbol of the cross, and it represents the power of the feminine. It represents the 3 faces of the feminine: the Virgin, the Mother, and the Crone. And how Christianity took those 3 faces of the feminine, stripped the feminine of its power completely, and made it into Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So now what has happened is the Pope has taken the power of the feminine, the power of creation itself, and stripped the feminine of her creative power and potential. So again, in the story of the Bible, Mary was a virgin, so even her procreative tendencies were stripped from her, her sexuality was stripped from her, and only to be of service to the divine and to give birth to Jesus was sexuality even part of the pattern. So this symbol is a very, very powerful card. There's a tremendous amount of information here. When someone gets this card represents the spiritual father. So it represents how we use society and the rules of society to dictate our behavior. So just as you've been in the progress of the child from the fool all the way now to the Hierophant, and we've gone through the priestess, which was the spiritual mother, and the empress, which was the earth mother, and the emperor, which is the earth father, and now we are finally at the Hierophant, which is the spiritual father. This dictates the rules of society that we all must learn in order to belong. You have to remember that in ancient cultures, the Catholic Church and religion was the government. It actually created the laws and it created the rules. It also created all the universities and the schools. So they controlled the element of knowledge. So when someone gets this card, they need to look at how they were raised related to the religion, the belief systems, what they think, their perspective. Now, sometimes that perspective could be that you believe you're an American and your entire belief system is structured around that. You can also have people that can be addicted to technology and their entire life and focus and rules of engagement and rules of society are based on the rules of a game. So this card is a very important card right now because I think that we need to expand the rules of society and we need to understand what serves the highest evolution of humanity rather than to control people like children and to suppress the feminine. And as we are doing this particular cycle, I think the feminine now is coming back into power and a better balance with the masculine.